look at this extremely concerning. This is where our taxpayer money in Europe is going to feed the 150 EU officials that are going to monitor Musk live talk. Do they have pretzels on their table? Do they have like a glass of water as they're doing this extremely difficult job in the middle of the winter? If they do, we're paying for that. Like when you eat those pretzels, if you're one of those 150 EU officials, we are the ones providing you with food. You should be grateful. You should thank us. And of course, you're thanking us by making sure that Elon Musk doesn't destroy our very strong democratic foundations with his interview. Let me teach you all something that they don't tell you in schools. It's also interesting, like my taxpayer money goes to pay school teachers that are incapable of teaching even the most basic shit. Let's talk a little bit about our democracy. Like everyone talks about preserving it, like we need to protect it. But like, what exactly is our democracy? How did it came to be? Well, in the past, we didn't have the current system. In the past, we used to have monarchies. Like we still have monarchies today, but they're not like the ones in the past. The ones in the past were very Chadian-like. So the concept of the monarchy back in the day, it wasn't about the rule of law. Like this is a new concept. No, back in the day, it was about divine right. So everybody believed that there is a God. They may have disagreements on how that God looked like or tried to interpret his will, but like everybody in Europe believed that there is a supernatural entity that exists. Like it wasn't a philosophical concept. No. Like they unironically believed that there is a heaven, and inside the heaven there is God. Like they didn't have satellites or spaceships in order to go to the sky. Like they would look at the clouds and they would see that besides those clouds there is actually the gates of heaven. Like they unironically believed this. And they believed that this almighty entity, all-powerful, all-knowing entity, has chosen one man in order to govern the nation. And so I just want you to imagine what goes on in a medieval peasant's head. If the most powerful being in the universe has chosen one man, well, that man, whatever he says, is law, right? Because the God is benevolent, all-knowing, and so if you don't follow the guy that he chose, you're not just in trouble with the guy, you're also in trouble with the divine. And obviously, the choice wasn't necessarily like God himself chose, but it's like back in the day, he anointed that family line, that heritage, right? So like the king gets to be crowned by the pope, like it's symbolic, like God's vicar on earth is crowning the pope. They genuinely believe this. Like this is not a hypothetical or like, no, like they were just as convinced about this like you are about 2 + 2 = 4. And so the person that the God anoints gets to select some individuals that are the aristocracy. And everyone else is the peasantry. So in other words, the law comes from God through the king. And the king owns everything in the land. Like nothing moves without the king's consent. If the king wants something, it happens. He's got absolute rule. This is why the British, when they first rebelled against the king, it was so inconceivable. They didn't, like when they won their civil war, they wouldn't even want to execute the king because like they didn't know. It's like, well, if the law comes from the king, how can the king break the law? Like they were looking at it as if someone did 2 + 2 and got the 5 result. Like someone added 2 matches, another person added another 2 matches, and when they counted, there were 5. Like it just baffles the brain. Like they didn't know what to do with this. And so this was the system back then. So how did we get to the system we have now? Well, the Brits rebelled against the colonies and became Americans. And so they looked at the old system and they were like, we don't like the old system. Why should people be subjects? Like why should some people be better than others? We don't believe that God is anointing someone. We don't think that like God is actually putting a king and that king gets to have absolute rule over everyone. Because they have that in Europe, right? And if God selects the king of the Holy Roman Empire, and he selects the king of France, and he selects the king of Britain, why are they fighting against each other then? What's with all the European wars and shit? I don't think that God is choosing a monarch. And if God isn't choosing a monarch, then the aristocracy also doesn't make sense. How about we're all equal? How about we're all equal in the eyes of the law? Like, we're not equal, because obviously a person, like I, am not equal to who I was 10 years ago. Like, even when comparing with myself, two brothers under the same household aren't equal. But what if we're equal under the law? Like, the same set of rules apply to everybody. Because back in the day, that wasn't the case. Like, if you raped a woman, if you're an aristocrat who raped a peasant girl, you had to pay a fine. If you are a peasant that raped a noble woman, you get the news. Right? So, like, the same crime. The same thing was punishable differently. So the Americans are like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to create a rule of law. Like, our country is not guarded by divine right. It's actually by rule of law. Everyone is going to follow the same rules. Obviously, there are criticism to it because at the time Americans have slaves, but they can say, no, the rule of law applies to citizens. The slaves weren't citizens when it was created, but that's a different conversation. The important thing is that this is what defines a rule of law. Everyone is subjected to the same rules. And the question was okay, so who governs us then? Are we going to have a king? Can we have King Washington? That was actually something that was being suggested at the time. Let's have King Washington. He's the best general we had. He won it only makes sense that he would be king. And Washington didn't want to be king. He wanted, no, we're going to have a completely different system. And so they came up with the concept of a president. As far as I know, it's actually the first nation on earth that came with the concept of having a president. It's what is a president? Well, it's a humble title, right? It's not a baron. It's not a mayor. It's not a governor. No, it's a president. In other words, it's someone that goes in there for a limited amount of time, 4 years, gets to be voted by the public. And the title itself, as I mentioned, is a humble title, right? It's not king, it's not baron, it's president. Kind of like a class president, if you will. Like a friendly title. He's the president of the club. And so going back to where we are today, people notice that it's a very good system. It created one of the strongest nations on earth, a stable system, and people did come to the conclusion that, yes, it's a fair system. Why should we be subject? Why should I be born in a position that I cannot escape? So basically, regardless of my talent, of my skills, of my abilities, if I'm born a peasant, I will always be a peasant. And someone, if they're born an aristocrat and they're an absolute incompetent, jaw-dropping retard, they are going to still loom over me, and they're going to have more privileges than I ever will, regardless of what I do, and regardless how incompetent those people are, right? You look at the Byzantium Empire, and you had absolute cretins, like emperors, that were locked in cages because they were biting their ministers, but they were considered to be better than you, simply because they were born that way. And you had an entire army of bureaucrats trying to control the situation and manipulate the public opinion. They used to have deep states back then. But anyway, that's besides the point. The thing is, we're all LARPing now, as if the American original system that the founding fathers created is the best system on earth. And I do agree, but we're LARPing as if we're having that system when we're trying to go back to the previous one, where the bureaucrats are the actual aristocrats, and we're managing the retarded Byzantium emperor locked in the cage. And the reason I'm saying this is how do you select a class president? How do you actually decide who gets to be your class president? Or the president of a club? Whatever. You talk to the man, right? You're going face to face, you're talking with him, you're asking him questions. Are there any fact checkers? Are there any other people influencing you? No, you're sitting down with the person, you're having a conversation, you're trying to assess whether they're honest or not. You're trying to assess whether they believe, whether they're competent. And then you talk with the other guy. And at the end of the day, you make a decision, right? Like, you're going to vote. This is the class president that I like. And that's how they get nominated. But now, because we have more people, it's physically impossible for a politician to actually have a one-on-one chat with the tens of millions of citizens. And so we have the media to help us. We got newspapers, we got the TV, we got social media to try and bridge that gap, to allow the politician to talk with the people. But unfortunately, this is dangerous for all those ministers and bureaucrats that are trying to keep the emperor in the gilded cage. And they're trying to LARP as if we're a democracy. So they don't want specific politicians to win, because they may expose what's actually happening with the emperor. And so this is where the fact checkers come in. This is where the 150 EU officials come in. Like, imagine if you're trying to vote for class president, but there's like 150 people that are sitting between you and the guy, and they're constantly contradicting, interrupting, obfuscating, and they're also treating you like a moron. They're treating you like an imbecile, as if you're not capable yourself to discern if the guy is lying to you, if the guy is dishonest, if the guy is not capable. And it's interesting how that doesn't happen when you want to buy a car, how it doesn't happen when you want to get a loan, how it doesn't happen when you want to make a decision that can influence your life. All of a sudden, those 150 EU politicians aren't there. Even if your decision can fuck up your life entirely, they're not there. But when it comes to voting, that's when they appear. And that's when misinformation and disinformation is a problem. I find it absolutely disgusting what's happening right now. The way that Romania used to have these debates, they would have them on television. And I remember, like, every single night, not even in America this happens. Like, there are certain things that Romania did which, it doesn't do anymore, and I wish it would. But, like, in my opinion, that is genuine expressions of democracy. So I want you to imagine this, like, on Fox News or CNN, every single night you would have an important Republican, an important Democrat, maybe someone that's independent as well, and someone from the Libertarian Party, right? So, like, every single night you have these talk shows, and those talk shows would last for like 4 or 5 hours. And the moderator never interrupted, the moderator never intervened, like, they would just ask questions. And why was it 4 or 5 hours? And it would go all the way until 1 a.m. Because the point was to make sure that the politician gets tired, that the politician is under stress, that the politician is being pressured by other politicians, so that people get to see how the politicians react. Are they saying something that they shouldn't? Are they acting in a way that they shouldn't? And it would get really interesting as it got close to midnight, and you'd see, like, a lot of politicians, like, some of them would break under the pressure. They would start to curse, swear. They would say things that don't make sense. But the public was watching. And you'd see that none of them are perfect. You'd see that all of them have their flaws. All of them are lying, manipulating. But they had no prompter. They had no earpiece. It was just them answering questions and facing off against their peers. And so that is genuine democracy. That is like the true thing. Is the European Union doing that? Do we have that in the modern era? Do you know why that's interesting? Like, we had the President Băsescu. He won those very difficult debates. And then when he was interviewed, he was in, I think it was in the Russian parliament as a guest. And one of the Russians was asking if Romania wants to conquer Moldavia. Like, a very shameful question, like trying to get one up. But because he was a statesman used to this type of debates, he was laughing. And he said, like, Romania doesn't have the same experience as Russia when it comes to conquering foreign lands and imperialistic tendencies. Like, the man would just destroy anyone with a phrase because he went through those debates. He was a genuine statesman. Even though, like, as a politician, he did many bad things and whatever, You can't fault the guy for knowing how to debate, for knowing how to present himself. And the public knew who they voted for. That's why the European Union has absolutely no interest in teaching people about the rule of law, about what a democracy is. Like, sure, they will say that. They will mention it. They will act like it's important, but they have no interest in trying to educate the citizens, so he doesn't need those 150 EU officials. So they can just watch a debate, so that they can actually watch something unfiltered and make their own opinion. And the reality is, if you actually watch old televisions, especially from the United States, even from Britain, if you watch from the 90s, from the 80s, they didn't have fact checkers. They didn't have 150 officials trying to obfuscate. No, they had genuine debates, and they treated their public with respect. They treated their public like adults. Like, you are capable of making your own decision. And of course, some people may not be. Some people may make a poor choice. They may get buyer's remorse. Like, after every election, there are people that are like, oh, I regret the way I voted. Sure. But how many of them are there? Are they like 60% of the country, 50%? No, it's usually like 5%, and it evens out because it's on both sides. And this is what really disgusts me with modern democracies, because I don't believe they're democracies. I do not believe that the people in charge are treating the citizens as they should. I think they're trying to manipulate the citizens. The bureaucrats that keep the emperor in the golden cage, they're trying to manipulate us. They're looking down on us. They're condescending towards us. And it's not because they want our well-being. It's because they like their seats. They're liking their power. They love the fact that they can tax us and take our money and give it to themselves, to their friends, to their relationships. Not through illegal means. Like, sometimes a bureaucracy has vacant places. And who gets to fill those vacant places? It's interesting how often it's the relatives, the acquaintances, the friends of the people that are already part of the bureaucracy. Isn't that weird? Like, you have an entire family that's into politics. How does that happen? And so, in Germany right now, 150 EU officials to monitor a talk show. Interesting, isn't it? In Germany, they were also talking about banning the AFD, the second largest party. And this is also what happened in my country, where they decided to redo the elections. And I'm starting to come to the conclusions that maybe elections are bad for democracy, aren't they? I mean, why even have elections? Aren't things good the way they are now? Like, we got Schulz in Germany, we got Macron in France, we got Johannes in Romania, we got stability. Isn't stability good? Like, wouldn't it be better if in America you still had Sleepy Joe? So aren't elections the problem then? I would say that elections are actually an attack on democracy. Elections come from Putin. Like, without elections, Putin would be powerless in Europe. But because of elections, like, Putin is capable of interfering. I almost wonder how a life in the day of Putin is like. Like, he's got to write all these conspiracy theories for all these nations. He's like sitting there scribbling like conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. And okay, send it. This one goes to Austria. This one goes to the United States. This conspiracy goes to Germany. What about grooming gangs? All right. This one goes to the UK. And what Putin does all the fucking day. And then the rest of the day, he's like, all right, tell me what happened. Well, sir, we managed to influence the Romanian elections. In Germany, the AFD is polling really well. We got Donald Trump in the United States. Unfortunately, we can't fucking get Moldavia. Unfortunately, in that fucking country that neighbors us, we didn't manage to influence them. It's like, it's okay. Harasho. Next time, 4 years. Like, we're going to do that. We couldn't influence the elections in the Ukraine. Fuck. Hey, we're sending military there. Right, like, this is what I understand by following the news. It's like, Putin is just writing conspiracies after conspiracies, constantly attacking the European Union, nonstop. And then it's like influencing elections. And so, you can destroy all this power he has by just not doing elections. They're an attack to democracy. Again, stability, right? Schulz in Germany, Macron in France, Trudeau in Canada. I mean, he stepped down, but like, see, you could have prevented this. Now there's instability in Canada. Now it's probably like if Trudeau managed to remain, you had stability. Isn't the system much better like this, huh? Let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.